Yeah, so you asked if he cared about 8,000 dead babies, and his answer was no. Queen Rania bothers me, so complete non-answer, because he doesn't care. He doesn't think that Palestinians' lives are worth anything. He just called them all terrorists.
Well, it's nice you can put that
and this is what they always do.
There you go.
So hold on, I let you talk for a long time, so why don't you shut up for a second? So we've got all of these dead babies. We've got all of these dead babies that this monster doesn't care about.
DouglasMurray obliterates a Hamas supporter with ruthless facts on terrorism. In this electrifying showdown, Murray doesn't just challenge, he annihilates, exposing the dark truth behind extremist ideology with laser-sharp precision.
The world cried out for the 36 Israeli dead children. No, they didn't, and you know that very well. You know that very well. If you put up a poster to a missing dog in any Western city, that poster stays up. In city after city in America, posters of abducted Jewish children, including a 10-month-old baby, were put up and were ripped down by people who have been indoctrinated into hate of Jews. Nobody would rip down the poster of a missing dog, but from Dublin to Berkeley, they ripped down posters of abducted Jewish children. So no, I don't think there was very much care. Let me put this to you.
Murray leaves no room for denial and no space for retreat. Buckle up, because this confrontation will shake you to your core.
People who think they know how the IDF should be running this conflict have never been near a conflict. I'm in Israel tonight. I was in Gaza again yesterday. And the examples that you give, by the way, Piers, I don't see why they show any need to prosecute the war itself differently. I mean, just to take one of them, the first example you give, the absolutely tragic, awful shooting of these 3 hostages as they were coming out. But, you know, some of the spin that's been put on that in the world, apart from the glee, of course, that Israel's enemies can't help expressing, some of the spin on that is almost as if it shows the IDF is a sort of so brutal that it even kills Hamas hostages who are Israeli. I just think this is another example of the international media and others just having this astounding lack of empathy for the Israeli people. Can you imagine what it was like for those soldiers who were in Gaza, knowing that at any point there are snipers, there are booby traps everywhere, people coming out of tunnels that they've built at British and American taxpayer expenses and attacking them? Can you imagine what it was like for the soldiers who, in that terrible moment, made the life-changing mistake of shooting 3 people who turned out to be Hamas hostages?
While Murray defends the IDF's actions as inevitable in the chaos of war, critics might argue that this overlooks the ethical responsibility to avoid civilian harm, even in difficult combat situations. The tragic killing of hostages underscores the need for stricter safeguards, and dismissing media scrutiny can deflect from the real issue of accountability. No matter the complexities, military actions should prioritize minimizing civilian casualties, as international law requires.
Anyone who was shirtless and waving an SOS flag. I mean, why would whoever they were, whether they were Israeli hostages or whether they thought they were Palestinians, why would anyone shoot anyone who comes out like that? That's my point.
That'll be a matter for the inquiry into it. But look, it's hardly as if they'd have wanted to have done that. What this demonstrates is, in this incredibly close conflict in a heavily built-up area, with people coming out from all sides, firing, shooting, detonating, people make mistakes. Of course they do. That's just a human reality of war, horrible as it is. I don't think it shows in any way that Israel is prosecuting this war wrongly. As for the main issue of the war is to destroy Hamas. No Israeli of left or right or center believes anymore after October the 7th they can live beside Hamas. Hamas has been given the statelet of Gaza. It was given it in 2006, voted in, then killed their fellow Palestinians in a coup, killed Fatah rivals, and they've run the Gaza for almost 18 years now. And they've produced a new generation of people whose main aim in life, it seems, according to their textbooks and their classes, is to regard Jews as enemies who should be killed. This is just an unbelievable waste, a waste of life on every side, but apart from anything else, a waste of those Palestinian lives, of children who grew up under Hamas's rule, if you can call it that, who have been indoctrinated into becoming sociopaths by a psychopathic terror organization, Hamas.
Murray argues that Israel must destroy Hamas for its security, but critics could counter that military force alone won't bring lasting peace. Ignoring the underlying issues, like occupation and economic hardship in Gaza, may only fuel further resentment and extremism. While Hamas's indoctrination is a problem, a purely military approach risks perpetuating the cycle of violence. Sustainable peace needs both security measures and addressing the root causes of the conflict.
So that's a weapon of mass distraction. It's Israel doing genocide on the Palestinians right now. And there's IDF soldiers singing and in video that the IDF has confirmed about how they're going to wipe out the seed of Amalek. That is a verse in the old Hebrew Bible that talks about exterminating Amalek. So they're talking about genocide against Palestinians. Benjamin Netanyahu has also talked about wiping out Amalek. These are open calls for genocide. What I find stunning, Douglas mentioned stunning lack of empathy. There's 20,000 dead people in Palestine right now in Gaza. Over 8,000 of them are children. When 36 Israeli children were killed by Hamas, the world cried out, and I was brokenhearted over it. 36 poor kids dead in Israel. Now there's over 8,000 dead kids in Gaza. You want to talk about a stunning lack of empathy. 6,400 women slaughtered in Gaza. You want to talk about terrorism? They're dropping unguided bombs, 2,000-pound bombs. Every one of those bombs is an act of terrorism. And the stunning lack of empathy towards Palestinian lives is disgusting. But I want to be clear, it is not shared by all Israelis. The dad of one of the hostages who was killed went on Israeli television and said, "Stop killing them." And he didn't mean the hostages. He meant the Palestinians.
Cenk Uygur makes a strong case by highlighting the vast disparity in civilian casualties, particularly the thousands of Palestinian children killed, which underscores the lack of empathy for Palestinian lives. His critique of Israeli military tactics, like the use of unguided bombs in populated areas, aligns with concerns about disproportionate force, calling these actions acts of terrorism. Uygur's points challenge the moral and ethical dimensions of the ongoing conflict, emphasizing the urgent need for greater empathy and accountability.
All right, but Jake, let me just jump in. But before I go back to Douglas' response to this.
Let me reply to that, Piers.
Yeah, I will let you reply to that. On this issue of genocide, do you accept, though, that Hamas's whole raison d'etre when it comes to Israel is genocide? They want to eradicate Israel and kill as many Jews as they can. I mean, they've made no secret of this.
Yeah, so this is really important. So I have no sympathy for Hamas. So I'm not interested in defending Hamas. I think that's nothing but a distraction. Because right now they're not fighting Hamas. They're just killing Palestinian civilians.
Well, they're also killing Hamas terrorists. They are. I mean, they're killing thousands of them.
Barely. No, wait a minute. Barely. But let's go to your main point, okay? So the main point is, well, Hamas threatens X, Y, and Z and has killed 1,200 people on October 7th. So that is why we have to all worry about what Hamas might do
I don't think it's simple as that.
Hold on, let me finish the point. Let me finish the point. At what they might do if they had infinite power, the kind of power that Israel has. Meanwhile, Israel is actually doing the genocide, is actually preventing a Palestinian state and saying you are not allowed to exist, and if you dare try to exist, we'll kill 20,000 of your children and women.
All right.
Uygur argues that while Hamas's intentions are genocidal, Israel's military actions are causing massive civilian casualties, which he views as a form of genocide in practice. He highlights the power imbalance, stressing that Israel's response is disproportionately killing Palestinian civilians, particularly women and children, while preventing the existence of a Palestinian state. This, according to Cenk, shifts the focus from Hamas's threats to Israel's actual actions, which are devastating for Palestinian lives.
Several things. First of all, anyone who uses the term genocide in this context simply doesn't know what they're talking about, or is a malevolent actor. I don't know if Mr. Uyghur's travelled at all in his life, how far he's travelled, how many conflicts he's seen, but I'd have guessed none. And you clearly know nothing about this particular conflict, and you've obviously seen none of it. The genocide that you describe is such a smear and a libel against the Jewish state. If Israel wanted to commit genocide, I'm sure it could, but it doesn't. It doesn't remotely want to. And people like you and other pro-Palestinian propagandists have spent years claiming that Israel is committing genocide in the Gaza. By the way, the weirdest thing about this claim is that the population of the Gaza has grown by 1 million in the last 15 or so years. So if Israel was trying to carry out a genocide, it's either the worst perpetrator of genocide ever or uniquely poor at performing that task. None of the stats support that ridiculous claim. And it's such a weird smear and a libel of Israel. Secondly, of course, you've just rattled off Hamas figures, as everyone of your kind always does. Thirdly, you said that the world cried, you said that the people like you who cover for the Palestinian extremists. Thirdly, you said that the world cried out for the 36 Israeli dead children. No, they didn't. And you know that very well. You know that very well. If you put up a poster to a missing dog in any Western city, that poster stays up. In city after city in America, posters of abducted Jewish children, including a 10-month-old baby, were put up and were ripped down by people who have been indoctrinated into hate of Jews. Nobody would rip down the poster of a missing dog, but from Dublin to Berkeley, they ripped down posters of abducted Jewish children. So no, I don't think there was
Douglas,
very
let me
much
put this to you.
Murray's criticism of the use of the term genocide in this context can be addressed by noting that accusations of genocide require specific criteria. The population growth in Gaza does challenge the genocide claim, as it suggests that, despite high civilian casualties, the population has not been decimated. Additionally, while Murray critiques the focus on Israeli civilian casualties and alleged bias against Jewish victims, it's important to acknowledge that public and media reactions can be varied and influenced by many factors. The concern over Hamas's intentions is valid, but the scale and impact of Israeli military actions also warrant scrutiny to ensure humanitarian considerations are met.
You said what Hamas might do, as if it was some kind of hypothetical. Hamas showed what they do, what they want to do. It showed it on October the 7th, and its leadership, as I'm sure you very well know, said that they would like to repeat that again and again until they have got rid of every Jew. So, I don't know. I would trust Hamas's word on that rather than your interpretation of what you think they mean when they say that, and your generous interpretation of what you think that means. And finally, as for preventing a Palestinian state, it is nonsense that the Israelis have prevented a Palestinian state. They gave the Gazans a Palestinian state in 2005. They gave them a Palestinian state in 2005 when every Jewish person was ripped from their homes in the Gaza by IDF soldiers. And the Palestinian people were given a state. And what did they do? They voted in Hamas, who then killed their fellow Palestinians, never had another election, and used all the billions of dollars of taxpayer funds from the US, UK, and Europe to build terror tunnels and to enrich themselves so they could live the life of luxury in Qatar. Again and again, the reason there is not a Palestinian state is because the Palestinian leadership doesn't want one.
Okay, Douglas,
didn't want one in 1947, it preferred war, and it doesn't want one now.
Murray's focus on Hamas's genocidal intent overlooks the broader context, including the impact of Israeli policies and the blockade on Gaza. The claim that Israel provided a Palestinian state in 2005 is disputed, as ongoing occupation and lack of a peace process have impeded statehood. Additionally, internal Palestinian divisions complicate the situation, making it crucial to consider all factors in the conflict.
These are gigantic and horrendous numbers of children being killed. Do you not have any qualms about the number of children being killed? I mean, does it not suggest that Israel...
I want to hear Queen Rania talking about this as much as I want to hear Queen Camilla or Meghan Markle. I mean, it's pathetic. Queen Rania is holding on to her own position in Jordan. The only piece of advice she has for anyone is how to marry a king. Queen Rania herself is just playing a very nasty political game. If she cared at all, and I would pose this to all the states in the region, if Jordan cared at all for the Palestinian people, they would take them in. They would take them in. They don't want them. If the Egyptians wanted them, they'd take them in, but they don't. Do you know why? Because every country that takes in the Palestinians gets terror. It happened in Egypt, it happened in Jordan, it happened in Syria, it happened in Lebanon, it happened in Tunisia, on and on. That's why these people don't really care about their fellow Muslims. They just care about hating Jews.
All right, Cenk, your response.
Murray's dismissal of the high number of child casualties and his criticism of neighboring Arab countries missed the crucial humanitarian aspect of the crisis. The significant death toll among children is a pressing issue that demands serious attention and action, regardless of political factors. Moreover, blaming Arab nations for not taking in Palestinian refugees overlooks the complex political and security challenges they face. The real focus should be on addressing the humanitarian crisis and working towards a resolution that ensures the protection and well-being of all civilians affected by the conflict, rather than deflecting blame or minimizing the severity of the situation.
Yeah, so you asked if he cared about 8,000 dead babies, and his answer was no. Queen Rania bothers me, so complete non-answer, because he doesn't care. He doesn't think that Palestinians' lives are worth anything. He just called them all terrorists.
Well, it's nice you can put that
and this is what they always do.
There you go.
So hold on, I let you talk for a long time, so why don't you shut up for a second? So we've got all of these dead babies. We've got all of these dead babies that this monster doesn't care about. He says keep bombing them. A former intelligence officer said in the Israeli press they're using AI in a program called The Gospel, where he said it's basically a mass assassination factory. And we could all see it with our own eyes. And you can do all the propaganda you want. No one believes your nonsense. We see all the dead women. We see all the dead children. Now Israel has killed 20 times the number of civilians that Hamas killed. So would I want Hamas in charge of Israel? Never, never. I don't trust them. And I don't believe that they would be benign. So all of this propaganda about, people don't mind Hamas. No, we mind Hamas. We terribly what happened on October 7th. And I've now shown you different Israelis that have said that it's a problem. And I want peace and security for both Israel and Palestine. And this does not get Israel any peace or security.
Uyghur criticizes the factors including the severe humanitarian impact of the conflict, particularly the high number of civilian casualties, including children. His concern that these losses are dismissed or minimized is valid and underscores the need for genuine empathy and action. He also points out that while no one supports Hamas's actions, the disproportionate number of civilian deaths caused by Israeli bombings raises serious ethical questions. The focus should be on addressing the humanitarian crisis and finding a solution that protects civilians and leads to lasting peace and security for both Israelis and Palestinians.
But when you ask the other side, do you mind tens of thousands of civilians that have been murdered, incinerated alive, body parts picked out of rubble, little babies killed over and over again, in what is even the Israeli Prime Minister is referring to as Amalek, meaning an extermination of the Palestinian people. And I must clarify the difference between a genocide and a Holocaust. A genocide is when you target a specific people and kill a lot of civilians. Srebrenica, where 6,000 people were killed, was considered a genocide. So it doesn't mean you try to murder every single person in that
Cenk, let me ask
race.
you.
That is a Holocaust.
Let me reply.
Wait, one second. Before I go to Douglas, Cenk, one question. You want to get rid of Hamas too, as does Douglas, as do I. If you don't do it the way that Israel is currently doing it, given that they live amongst the population, how else do you do it?
Yeah, there's an excellent way to do it, and there's the right way to do it. So let me explain. So war, this guy talks about, oh, I love war. I go to all the conflict zones. So by watching it and rooting on for more death, I know something about conflict. You know nothing. So here's what reality is. War gets you more war, but peace actually works. So when Israel did a peace deal with Egypt, not only were the Egyptians safe, but the Israelis became safer. That peace deal has held for decade after decade. So how do you do a peace deal in this case?
Uyghurs' emphasis on the high civilian toll and the ethical issues surrounding Israel's military actions highlights a crucial concern. While combating Hamas is necessary, Uyghur rightly points out that the current approach, which leads to extensive civilian casualties, is problematic and counterproductive. His advocacy for a peaceful resolution based on past successes underscores the need for effective and humane strategies to address security threats without perpetuating further violence and suffering.
What you do is you do the two-state solution now, and you do it with the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. And if you then have a Palestinian state, the Palestinian Authority would have the credibility to drive out Hamas from Gaza. That is a realistic plan for both peace, security for Israel and the Palestinians, and driving out Hamas. The idea that you're going to kill 20,000 more civilians, 200,000 more civilians in Gaza, and it's going to drive out Hamas is insanity.
Let me answer that.
Uyghurs' support for a two-state solution is well-founded. He argues that establishing a viable Palestinian state with the Palestinian Authority's involvement could be key to resolving the conflict. This approach offers a realistic path to peace and security for both Israelis and Palestinians, rather than continuing a strategy that results in extensive civilian casualties. His proposal emphasizes a diplomatic solution as a more humane and effective way to address the security concerns posed by Hamas.
First of all, I mean, your other guest, I mean, I don't know what kind of a creature he is. He's a kind of low-grade thug, as far as I can see. He's listened to nothing I've said.
Yeah, I know, because I'm Muslim. That's what we call all Muslims.
I'll tell you. No, it's not that at all. It's not that at all. I just think that I think you're just a very low-rent racist. But anyway, let me just get on to it. You say, first of all, I don't care about the death of Palestinian children. Yes, I do care. I care very deeply about it. But I also know that the responsibility for their deaths lies on Hamas, which has misgoverned their society for the last 16 years, and now has been leading the country into being in a war with Israel. So yes, it's on Hamas this. As for seeing wars, by the way, I just mentioned about seeing wars because as far as I can see, you're very ill-traveled as well as rather ill-lettered and ill-spoken. And I mention that I cover wars and go to wars because I happen to think myself that it's worth seeing things with your own eyes, including things that you don't particularly like, but you report the truth. I don't know if you ever even leave your own bedroom. And I can tell already that you don't because you've already said something that demonstrates you know nothing about this conflict. You have just demonstrated it in the following terms. You said that this is why we need to push for a two-state solution and give legitimacy to the Palestinian Authority. I'll tell you something you don't know because I guess you spent no time in the West Bank, have you? I'll tell you something you probably don't know. The Palestinian Authority, Fatah, celebrated the 7th of October massacres. I'll give you another fact which demonstrates you know nothing about this and clearly haven't ever visited any Palestinians in the West Bank as I have. If there was an election tomorrow in the West Bank, the reason why there isn't one is because if there was an election tomorrow in the West Bank, Hamas would win. So your idea of a two-state solution, I'm afraid you are so out of date and you really should leave your bedroom. Because in this region, nobody thinks that there is a two-state solution on the table because there is not a viable negotiating partner.
The two-state solution remains a widely supported framework for peace among many international actors and experts, despite the current challenges. While the Palestinian Authority's actions and the lack of elections are problematic, this doesn't negate the potential for a negotiated solution. Addressing the governance issues and ensuring credible peace talks could still provide a viable path forward. His blanket dismissal of this approach ignores ongoing international support and the potential for future negotiations.
But I just want to make one other main point. you have gone on and on tonight, throwing accusations out against the Jewish state, against me. It's the sort of thing you do. I know you're a sort of online pugilist and think you can run for office, and good luck with that. But I'd just like to point out that you only really get animated if the Jews are involved. And I can tell that for the following reason. I mean, your surname's Uyghur, isn't it? 1 million Uyghur Muslims in China have been put in concentration camps in the last decade. And people of your ilk never really care about that, do you? Because it's not the Jews doing it, it's the Chinese Communist Party. At the moment, 1 million people who are in Pakistan at the moment, who are your fellow Muslims and who happen to be Afghan, and I don't think you care about them, do you? 1 million Afghans are currently being forcibly deported from Pakistan to Afghanistan. You don't care about that. You're not riled up about that. You're not riled up about what the Janjaweed are currently doing in Sudan, where thousands and thousands of people are being attacked by the Islamist militia there. You don't care about any of that. You get exercised and you rile up what little base you have of malcontents because you're riled up when the Jews do anything.
All right,
it's
Cenk.
perfectly obvious.
Okay.
Murray's claim that critics of Israeli policy selectively focus on Jewish issues ignores the broad spectrum of human rights advocacy. Many who criticize Israel are also vocal about atrocities in China, Pakistan, and Sudan, demonstrating a commitment to global human rights rather than a biased focus. Accusations of selective outrage fail to acknowledge that individuals and organizations can and do address multiple crises simultaneously. His argument undermines the legitimacy of diverse human rights concerns and falsely portrays criticism of Israel as uniquely biased.
Okay, first of all, my last name is Uyghur. We're named after the Uyghur Turks in China. And have we talked about that on the Young Turks?
I thought you'd spoken up then.
Yes, we've talked about it endlessly, but you don't know that, and you don't watch the show.
Shame
you
nobody watches your show.
So,
nobody does watch your show.
Yeah, well, okay, again, you're interrupting me when I was kind enough to let you go on with your mad ramblings. So how nobody watches the show, we have 5 billion views a year. I don't know what piddling outfit you're on, or what little Substack or whatever the hell you write on. So the reason we're incredibly popular is we fight for all newspapers. We fight for We fight for all innocent civilians. So yes, we've covered all of those conflicts. Yes, I'm against fundamentalist Islam, no question about it. I'm against fundamentalist religions of all kind. In terms of every right-wing supporter of Israel, their only tactic is, hey, don't look at the 8,000 murdered children. Don't look at the 6,400 murdered women. Don't look at the fact that all the hospitals in northern Gaza have been shut down. Don't look at the fact that 4 out of 5 people in northern Gaza are starving right now, and half of the people in southern Gaza are starving. Instead, anti-Semite. Now, wait a minute. I just told you how much I want peace and security for Israel, how much I hated what happened on October 7th. What you don't know is I started the Young Turks with 2 Jewish friends. And so the whole program is both Jews and Muslims. You know nothing. I have Jewish family and friends. Why in the world, God, as they go to Israel, I want them to be safe, okay? So I have shown empathy for all civilians throughout everything I have ever done. But all you have is hatred. Oh, he's an anti-Semite. Kill the Muslims. Kill the Palestinians. And once we kill them, by the way, we'll blame them for it. Israel had to murder all those babies in Palestine because Hamas made us do it. Then why are you listening to Hamas? Why are you letting Hamas drive your agenda? Well, you don't have to kill those civilians. It's a mass assassination factory.
Uyghur's commitment to fighting for all innocent civilians is evident through his show's extensive coverage of global conflicts and his connections to Jewish communities. His criticism of those who deflect from the severe civilian impact of the conflict highlights the need for a balanced and empathetic approach, rather than focusing solely on allegations of anti-Semitism. Uyghur advocates for a more nuanced and humane response to the crisis, rather than using it as a platform for broad-based accusations.
What does it look like? Who runs Gaza? Where do these people go back to live? In other words, what actually happens if Israel is successful, however long it takes, in eliminating Hamas?
Well, first of all, I just have to add, you quite rightly said it, Piers, that the figures you gave are Hamas figures, and we do have to treat them with more than a grain of salt. As for, again, my counterpart here goes on about the deliberate genocide of children and women? I mean, I know, and this is the sort of thing I think you do. You sort of claim that there are bombs being deliberately dropped on children and old women. Why would Israel want to drop bombs deliberately on children or old women? I mean, it's just a shame you don't get out and see anything. The Israelis do an incredibly careful campaign before bombings to try to make sure that civilians are warned to leave areas that are about to be attacked. Everybody knows that. Everybody in the region knows that. It's a shame that that fact hasn't got to you. As it happens, the whole question you raised, Piers, is a very, very complex one. I don't have the answer. I don't believe anyone does have the answer about the day after. Nobody wants to rule the Gaza. The Israelis used to be in charge of it. They left, as I say, in 2005 to the last Jew. They were all taken out of their houses. Israel doesn't want to rule the Gaza. Now, who can rule the Gaza? Hamas clearly cannot, because they set it up as a terrorist statelet. Can some Fatah-like authority be encouraged to take it over? Possibly. I spoke to one Palestinian analyst earlier today who said that actually, just as I said earlier, that an election in the West Bank today would elect Hamas, perhaps an election tomorrow, if it was to happen, and I'm not sure if that's going to be a good idea, might even actually elect not Hamas Palestinians to power, but it's a heck of a risk.
Murray's view misses several critical points. Removing Hamas doesn't guarantee effective governance, as the PA's capability to manage Gaza is questionable. A comprehensive aid and reconstruction plan is essential because military action alone won't address the humanitarian crisis. Egypt and Jordan might resist taking in refugees or managing Gaza due to security concerns. Finally, substantial international support and coordination are necessary for peace and reconstruction.
The reality is that the only solution to Gaza that anyone can see, I can imagine, is that it has to be a solution which involves multiple players in the region. The question of the Gaza is a very complex question. It used to be ruled by Egypt, used to be run by Egypt. Can Egypt have a role? In my view, it has to have a role. Can Jordan be involved? In my view, yes, it has to have a role. Can the Gulf states, including those who've been pumping money to Hamas, have some kind of role? Yes, I would hope so. It cannot be Israel's task alone to deal with the question of the Gaza. It has to involve multiple players in the region, but there's one kicker to that, which is that none of the Arabs in this region that I'm sitting in care a jot about the Palestinians. They really do not. If they did, for all of their talk, they would have done something. They would not have decided to keep the Palestinians out, as they have in country after country. Queen Rania can invite the Gazans into Jordan. She can invite the West Bank Palestinians into Jordan. She doesn't. Egypt could open its border with Gaza. It doesn't. The Egyptian border with Gaza is firmer and more closely locked than the Israeli ones. There are Gazan workers who, until the atrocities of October the 7th, every day were going through the Eretz crossings and others to work in Israel and to earn a decent living. Were there workers going in daily into Egypt? No, because the Egyptians don't want Palestinians in their country. So the only solution is a regional one, but I'm afraid in this region there are very few people who care about the Palestinians.
Okay.
Murray's assertion ignores many key facts. While regional players like Egypt and Jordan should indeed play a role, it's inaccurate to claim that they have no interest in Palestinian welfare. Both countries have historically provided aid and asylum, despite political and security challenges. Egypt has managed complex relationships with Gaza and Palestinian workers, and Jordan has absorbed a significant number of refugees. The issue is more nuanced, involving regional politics, security concerns, and international diplomacy. The broader international community is also crucial in facilitating a sustainable resolution and addressing humanitarian needs.
So I wish to God that they would release those women and children. I think it's immoral to keep them. It's wrong in every way. But Israel kills more than 40 women and children every single day. All completely innocent. Look, even if you take IDF's outlandish numbers of 7,000 Hamas fighters killed, that means their kill ratio of civilians to fighters is still worse than Hamas's. And they have now killed 20 times the number of civilians that Hamas has killed. So when Douglas talks about driving them into Egypt or Jordan, that's just ethnic cleansing. They live in Gaza. So if you push them out and they say, well, you're all Arabs anyway, why don't you just go live somewhere else in the region? That's the definition of ethnic cleansing. That is outrageous. And he says it with blithely, with no concern, because Palestinian lives don't matter. And you ask them, hey, how many Palestinians can you possibly kill? And he never answered the question. So the reality is you cannot kill your way out of this conflict. The more that they kill, the more. What do you think that the Palestinians are going to feel? What would you feel if your family was butchered, if their heads were crushed by a bomb that was dropped on a building, if they were lit on fire by the bombs that were dropped? What would you do? You'd fight back the rest of your life. And then they are permanently occupied. And now Netanyahu says he was proud that he prevented a Palestinian state and that he will continue to prevent a Palestinian state. He is not a partner for peace. Or he profits from war. His whole career is about perpetuating war, not just to murder Palestinians, but it keeps Israel unsafe for eternity. So the whole point of Israel is to be a safe haven for oppressed Jews throughout the world. It cannot be a safe haven as long as you're imprisoning.
Cenk Uygur raises some important points here. The disproportionate killing of civilians compared to combatants, as evidenced by the high civilian death toll in Gaza, underscores the need for a more humane and strategic approach. Ethnic cleansing accusations are serious, and suggesting that Palestinians be displaced from their homes is unacceptable. Addressing the root causes of the conflict rather than escalating violence is crucial. A path to peace involves genuine efforts to address grievances on both sides and work toward a sustainable resolution, rather than perpetuating cycles of violence and retaliation.
5 million Palestinians and saying, we are never, ever going to let you go. And if you ever dare oppose us, we will kill your women and children. It's disgusting.
They're not in prison.
It's not what Israel was meant to do.
I'd urge you again, Cenk, leave your bedroom sometime and come to this region and see it for yourself.
Hey, I thought I was supposed to get the last word. This idiot's talking about bedrooms. Hey, you care about the babies. You care about the women. Douglas, why don't you admit you don't care about dead Palestinian babies, dead Palestinian women, because you don't mind it. Israel, you say right or wrong, no matter how many people they have murdered, no matter how many kids they have crushed to death, you don't care because you don't care about human beings. All you want is some sort of warmongering, Israeli state, U.S. state, etc.
All right,
neocon, warhawk.
I've got to wrap it up. I've got to say, listen,
little man.
I think we actually had a very
little man.
I found You're super evil. You don't mind the deaths of all those thousands of people.
Let's not
evil warmongering.
As the debate draws to a close, Uygur powerfully rebukes the indifference towards the suffering of innocent Palestinians. He emphasizes the moral obligation to address the humanitarian crisis and criticizes those who justify violence with rhetoric devoid of empathy. His closing words challenge the proponents of unrelenting conflict, insisting that true peace can only be achieved through compassion and a genuine effort to resolve the underlying issues. His passionate plea underscores the need for a shift from cycles of retribution to a meaningful dialogue aimed at ending the suffering and achieving a just resolution for all involved. This debate has laid bare the urgent need for empathy and realistic solutions in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. As we wrap up, remember that real change comes from understanding all sides and striving for peace. Share your thoughts, keep the conversation going, and let's push for a world where every voice is heard and every life is valued. Stay engaged and stay informed. Thanks for watching this video.